All right, now that we kind of discussed the end organ, right here, let's continue. We talked about Golgi tendon organs before. Golgi tendon organs are good for proprioception associated with tendons. Now, what we're going to see a lot of, and we kind of mentioned the primary receptor versus secondary receptor. This slide kind of talks a little bit more detail about that. Primary receptors, usually general sensation. The receptor is directly part of the axon itself, is part of our sensory neuron. So when that receptor activates, an action potential is directly stimulated in the sensory axon. Then you carry it into the spinal cord. That's a primary receptor. A secondary receptor is usually a receptor that's a completely different cell, a taste cell. Chapter 15, we'll talk also about retinal cells. So we have three main types of cells that corresponds to different sensitivity or different wavelengths of light. You've heard of people being colorblind? When you're colorblind, you're basically missing one of those cells. So then you can't see that wavelength of light. So what happens is instead of seeing nothing, you see things that are a little bit more grayish in color. And we'll talk about how that is. Now there are people that have a fourth cell. And people with a fourth cell are usually artists because they see more color, and we believe it's like 40 million more colors. Not just a few, all right? 40 million more distinct colors than we do. So they're the ones that tell you, right? They're looking at this picture and they're like, oh, that's kind of like a hunter green, and getting really into it, and you just think it's green. So those are the people. But they are very rare though. Now secondary receptors are these that we mentioned right here with the example of taste. Retinal cells for sight are also example of having a cell that activates when there's light, and then it releases a neurotransmitter onto your optic nerve. Adaptation, accommodation. Now, in terms of adaptation, we will be using this term a lot. Adaptation is decreased sensitivity to a continued stimulus. I love talking about this because we all have this sensation before. How many times when you just get out of the shower, you're putting some cologne on, you put the cologne on, you spray it on yourself, then you get dressed. When you first spray it on, you smell it, it smells great. And then you don't smell it anymore for a while. And then you get to work, you get to class, and the person next to you sits down next to you and kind of makes fun of you and says, what did you do? Bathe in it, right? Everybody has to say that. So once they say that, and then you're like, oh, and then you smell it again, what happens is crazy as this. If they sit next to you for any amount of time, they start accommodating to that smell as well. So what happens is when you spray that cologne on, your body, your olfactory nerves get accustomed and accommodate that same stimuli. So then that same stimuli doesn't keep activating your scent of smell. What happens then? Well, what happens is you go to work, you don't smell it anymore. But the person that sits next to you, they haven't had that adaptation. So when they sit next to you, at first, they smell it and it's pretty strong. And then they make their comment. And then after 10 minutes of sitting next to you, they also start to adapt to your smell. And they don't smell it anymore either. So this is something that allows us to kind of ignore the same stimulus. Another example is when we are at a restaurant, right? And when you first go into a restaurant, you go into Dave and Buster's, or you go into Famous Dave's Barbecue. And you first go into Famous Dave's, all you can figure out is, oh my God, it's smoky in here. I mean, it's a barbecue, right? So you expect it to be smoky. But you get in there and you're like, oh, it's so smoky. And then you sit down after a few minutes, you order, and you don't smell anything anymore, right? If you would go outside and then come back in, you would smell it again. But because you've been in that environment for so long now, you start to adapt to it. So then the action potentials that are normally triggered by that sensation no longer are activated. So what happens? You get home, right? You don't smell anymore. You get home, and next thing you know, you smell your shirt. And your shirt smells like smoke. You smell like smoke. Your hair smells like smoke. And what happens? You've accommodated and adapted to it, right? And during that time frame, you basically didn't have that sensation at all. Now, back when in the old days, when you could smoke in a bar, now we're talking about old days now, right? So people would smoke in bars and it would be just disgusting. People would smoke in nightclubs. And by the time you get home, you're so used to the smell of smoke, you don't smell it at all on you. And then you would lay down in bed because you're not taking a shower right then and there. And then you lay down in bed and your hair and your head and your shirt will smell like smoke, but you don't smell it until the next day. When you wake up the next day, you get up, you smell your pillow, and you smell that smoke, and it immediately makes you want to go take a shower, right? But that does happen all the time. And it doesn't have to be just smell, taste as well. How many times have you gone to Leon's? Love Leon's, right? And when you have Leon's, you go there and get Leon's, and you get the tin roof sundae. The first bite is so sweet. There's like, no way can I eat all this. Second bite, a little bit less sweet. And then, by the time it's done, right, you're licking the spoon, you're trying to get every single piece of chocolate in there, right? Because you don't even taste that sweetness anymore because our taste bud had adapted to it, right? And it kind of makes sense why. Why would we want to eat things that are sweet? Why would we want to eat and accommodate and adapt to things that are salty and meaty? It's easy. Those are things that we need in our body that you can't make by itself. You're not going to just produce glucose in your body. You need to eat it. So things that are going to be high in sugars, you have a tendency to adapt to, eat more of it, so then you can store it for later, right? So you start to adapt quickly to those things. There are certain tastes you don't adapt to, right? Usually those are the ones that are kind of toxic, right? Something that's bitter. You don't really adapt to that, right? But usually there's a reason why we don't adapt to it. It's because it can cause you to die if you do, right? Now, proprioception not just provides us with the location of our limbs in time and space, it also allows us to judge how to do certain movements. If I give you a baseball, you're going to throw a baseball a certain way. You can throw it overhand or underhand, right? But you know intimately how you should throw it. If I give you a shot put, right? Do you think you want to throw it overhand? Probably not. So shot puts are very heavy. So in order to lift it, you're going to have to, put a little bit more emphasis with getting your elbow underneath. You don't want to throw it like that, like a baseball, right? If you do, you're going to hurt yourself, and it's not going to go very far. So just by feeling the weight of something, feeling the actual texture of it, your proprioceptors can help you figure out and judge how to throw it, how that movement occurs to throw it. Okay, so now we go through start of the tough part right